You've probably spent years trying to become more disciplined. You woke up early, you made lists, you created routines. You promised yourself that this time would be different. And yet, at some point, it stopped. But perhaps the problem was never his lack of discipline. What if the problem was that you were trying to solve the right thing with the wrong tool? There is a word in Japanese that doesn't have a direct translation into English. This word has two characters. The first means one, the second, thought. Together they form something the Japanese have used for centuries to describe a specific state of mind, a state that, according to this tradition, is the origin of all true action, all real focus, all lasting transformation. That word is Ichinen, and that goes against everything you've ever been taught about discipline, willpower, and determination. Most people believe that discipline is a matter of strength. The more you resist, the more disciplined you are. The more discomfort you endure, the stronger you become. It's an almost military view. You train, you toughen up, you win, but there's a serious problem with that logic. Research on what scientists call ego depletion, the exhaustion of self-control, shows that willpower functions more like a muscle that tires than a permanent character trait. You use it throughout the day, and it diminishes. It's a finite resource. And when it runs out, you give in and then you blame yourself for it. The Japanese, in a way, already knew this. Not through neuroscience, but through centuries of observation of how human beings truly function under pressure. And the answer we have isn't be stronger. The answer is change the point of origin. Ichinen is not about strength. It's about clarity. It's not about resisting what you don't want. It's about fully inhabiting what you've chosen. But to understand what this really means and how it can change the way you act, focus, and live, I need to tell you the story of a young man who lived in feudal Japan more than 300 years ago. A young man who spent years trying to become something he could never be, until the day a samurai taught him that the problem had never been a lack of discipline. Before diving into this story, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do it now. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, it really helps the channel grow, and comment below, what area of your life do you feel lacks focus? Career, studies, relationships, health? Thank you so much for being here. Now let's go to 18th century Japan. Chapter 1. The Blacksmith's Son. The Nakamura family forge would wake up before sunrise. It had been like this for as long as Daiki could remember. The smell of hot charcoal filling the room in the early hours of the morning. The sound of the hammer starting slowly, gradually gaining rhythm until the whole house vibrated in that constant, methodical, inevitable pulse. His father, Kenji, was the best blacksmith in the village. Enormous hands, shoulders hunched forward as if he had spent his whole life carrying something heavy because he had. His uncles were the same. Men of few words and many calluses. Men who measured the value of a day by the weight of the iron they had bent. Daiki was 18 years old, and his hands were still smooth. Not because he didn't work. He did work. Every day since he was a child, he learned to feed the forge, to control the temperature, to listen to the sound of the metal when it was ready to be shaped. His father was proud of that. "One day this forge will be yours," he would say, and there was so much love in that phrase that Daiki never managed to say what he really thought. That he didn't want the forge. That at night, when everyone was asleep, he would light a small candle and read. He read the writings of Miyamoto Musashi. He read about the way of the sword, about how the perfect warrior is not just a fighter, but a man who has cultivated his mind with the same seriousness as his body. A man without inner division. Daiki wanted to be a samurai. Not for glory or status, not to wear armor or be called lord. He wanted what Musashi described between the lines, that specific clarity of a man who knows exactly who he is and acts in perfect alignment with that. That unity between what one thinks, what one feels, and what one does. He wanted to be whole. But there was a problem that Daiki only admitted to himself in the darkness. With the candle lowered and Musashi's writings in his hands, he couldn't maintain discipline. Chapter 2. The Divided Man. It was strange because Daiki woke up before dawn. He did his work at the forge without complaining. But when it came to training to become a samurai, something different happened. There were good weeks, Weeks when he would wake up an hour earlier and practice the fundamentals he had learned on his own. The basic sword movements, the balancing postures, the meditation that Musashi described. Weeks when his mind was sharp and his body obeyed. And then the other weeks would come. His mind grew heavy, his body heavy. The early morning candle lost its allure. Musashi's writings remained untouched in the same place. And Daiki spent his days at the forge with a strange feeling in his chest. Not exactly sadness, more like noise. A constant background noise, like two voices speaking at once without either of them being able to be heard properly. A voice said, "Go train. Be the warrior you want to be." The other one said, "What if it doesn't work out? What if you abandon the forge, disappoint your father, try this life and fail?" Neither of them won. And Daiki was paralyzed between those voices. That was the problem. Not a lack of desire. It was the division. It was trying to move two burdens in opposite directions with the same energy. And the more time passed, the more the weight of that division grew. Because Daiki knew with brutal clarity that he was wasting both paths at the same time. He wasn't good enough at forging because part of his mind was always elsewhere. And he wasn't progressing on the samurai path because the other part of his mind was holding him back. He was a man who existed entirely in the middle, without solid ground on either side. Until one autumn afternoon when everything changed. Chapter 3. The Samurai on the Road. Daiki was carrying raw iron from the warehouse to the forge when he saw him. The samurai walked slowly along the village's main road. There was something immediately different about that man. It wasn't the armor, which was partially concealed, nor the sword, which lay discreetly at his belt. It was the way he moved, as if each step were a conscious decision, as if the ground beneath his feet existed because he chose to be there. The other villagers looked at him with a mixture of reverence and unease. Children stopped playing. Shopkeepers bowed slightly. Daiki dropped the iron on the ground and went after it. Then he asked himself, countless times over the years, where that courage had come from. He wasn't the type of person to approach strangers, much less samurai. But something about that man, the way he walked as if there were no conflict within him, drew Daiki in, as if by gravity. "Sir," he said, bowing his head respectfully, "with your permission. My name is Daiki Nakamura. I am the son of a blacksmith, and I want to be a samurai." The samurai stopped. He turned slowly. He was a man of about 50 years old, his face marked by time, his eyes dark and completely still. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. Daiki hadn't planned what to say next. "Because I've seen how you walk and I want to learn to be like that. Not just with the sword. In my mind, I read Musashi. I train when I can. But I'm torn, sir. Always torn. And I don't know how to change that." Silence. The samurai looked at him for a time that seemed much longer than it actually was. Then he said, "Where is your father's forge?" "There, sir. 20 steps to the left. Take me there. I want to see how you work before deciding anything." Chapter 4. The Test. The samurai's name was Isamu, and he spent 3 hours watching Daiki work at the forge without saying a single word. Kenji, Daiki's father, was disconcerted by the visitor's silent presence in the corner of the forge, but said nothing. Samurai didn't question things. Daiki worked. He tended the fire, he bent the metal. He could hear the sound of the hammer, that steady pulse that was the melody of his childhood. And because Isamu was there, quiet and present, Daiki found himself paying attention to his own actions in a different way, as if he were seeing himself from the outside. Finally, as the sun began to set, Isamu spoke. "You have a problem that you described correctly, but named incorrectly." Daiki stopped. "Sir? You said you're divided, that's correct, but you blame the lack of discipline, that's wrong." Isamu stood up from the wooden chair where he had been sitting. "I watched you work for 3 hours. You are disciplined. Your father has a good forge because his sons learn to work carefully. But then why can't I? Because discipline isn't what's lacking." Isamu walked to the forge's exit and looked out at the courtyard. "What's lacking is Ichinen." Chapter 5. The First Lesson. They sat in the back patio when night fell, Kenji went to sleep without asking any questions. His uncles did too, and Daiki stayed there, with the forge fire still crackling softly in the background, listening. Ichinen, Isamu said, writing the two characters in the dirt with his finger. A thought. A moment of awareness. But not in the way you probably imagine. Daiki looked at the characters on the floor. Most people think their problem is a lack of effort, Isamu continued, so they try to put in more effort, more discipline, more strength. They wake up earlier, they promise more, and when they fail again, they conclude that they are weak people. He paused. But what really happens is different. Their energy isn't weak, it's divided. Like a campfire that you feed with damp wood from two sides at the same time, there's a lot of fire and little heat. Daiki felt it firsthand. That was exactly it. Ichinen is the practice of gathering that energy into a single point, Isamu said. Not of eliminating your fears or doubts by force, but of discovering, in each specific moment, what your truest intention is, and acting from there, completely, without reservation. How? Daiki asked. That's the wrong question for now. Isamu looked at him. The right question is, at this moment, what do you really want? Not what you think you should want, not what your father wants. What do you, Daiki Nakamura, want? The answer came before he could even think. I want to be a samurai. And what's in the way? Fear of disappointing my father, fear of failing, fear of... No, that's not in the way. Isamu interrupted him. Those fears are real, but they're not in the way. They're inside you, and you've been carrying them as if they were external obstacles, when in reality they're just thoughts. Thoughts you've never chosen to confront. A long silence. Ichinen begins here, Isamu finally said. Not in training, not with the sword. It begins the moment you stop living divided between what you are and what you want to be, and decide, with a complete thought, who you are choosing to be now. What Isamu was describing to Daiki in that dirt courtyard was not just philosophy. It was something that modern neuroscience would take centuries to begin to map. A Stanford University researcher studying how the mind works under pressure describes a phenomenon called cognitive interference. When two conflicting goals coexist in the mind simultaneously, the brain expends a disproportionate amount of energy managing the internal conflict, leaving much less for the execution of either goal. The problem isn't laziness, it's mental architecture. Another study, conducted in partnership between European and Japanese universities on high-performance practices, found a significant difference between elite martial arts practitioners and intermediate practitioners. It wasn't the intensity of the physical training. It was what the researchers called intentional coherence, the degree to which the present action is aligned with a single clear internal value. Elite practitioners weren't more disciplined in the sense of using more willpower. They simply had less internal conflict at the moment of action. A neuroscientist at the University of Tokyo who studies states of deep focus describes this in more direct terms. The human mind wasn't designed to sustain divided attention for long periods. When you try to act on two simultaneous value systems, what you think you should be and what part of you genuinely wants to be, you don't just become paralyzed. You actively wear yourself out without producing anything. It's the hidden cost of a life lived without clarity of intention. The Japanese called this Ichinen, the opposite state, that of acting from a whole and undivided consciousness, and Daiki was about to find out, in the hardest way possible, what that meant in practice. Chapter 6. The Training. Isamu stayed in the village for 3 months. He had no urgent destination. He was a ronin, a masterless samurai, traveling through Japan with the tranquil slowness of someone who had already resolved most of his internal issues, and for reasons Daiki never fully understood, he decided to stay. Training began the following morning. Daiki expected swords, techniques, movement sequences. Isamu arrived with 2 stones and a bowl of water. "Sit here." He pointed to the patio floor. Daiki sat down. Isamu sat across from him. He placed the bowl between them. "Look at the water." Daiki looked. "Daiki, now think about everything that worries you. Your father, the forge, the fear of failure, everything." Daiki didn't need to make an effort. The thoughts came on their own. "See how the water is." Daiki looked. The surface was slightly disturbed, perhaps by the wind or the vibration of footsteps on the ground. "It's moving." "The water didn't move, you moved." Isamu picked up one of the stones and held it in his open hand. "Now look at this stone, just this stone. Feel its weight, its temperature, its texture. Just the stone, nothing else." Daiki tried. The thoughts kept coming for a while. His father's voice, the image of the forge, the weight of fear. But something curious happened when he insisted on bringing his attention back to the stone. The thoughts didn't disappear, but they gradually lost volume, as if, without attention, they were losing fuel. After a few minutes, all that remained was the stone. "How is the water now?" Isamu asked. Daiki looked. He was completely still, a perfect mirror. "The water hasn't changed," Isamu said. "You have changed. That's Ichinen. It's not about emptying the mind. It's about learning to focus the mind on a single point until the noise loses its power due to lack of attention." Chapter 7. The Resistance of the Family. The biggest problem didn't come from Daiki. It came from Kenji. In the third week of training, when it became clear that Daiki was waking up earlier, not for the forge, but for the courtyard with Isamu, his father called for a conversation that Daiki had dreaded his whole life. "Are you going to abandon everything we've built?" Kenji said. There was no anger in his voice, there was something worse, genuine incomprehension. "Your grandfather built this forge. I've spent my whole life here, your uncles. This is who we are. This is who you are." "Good. Samurai." Kenji said the word as if it tasted bitter. "Do you know how many men tried that path and came back broken, or didn't come back at all?" Daiki didn't answer. "You're throwing away a sure life for a dream that may not exist. I taught you to bend iron because iron is real. You can hold it, you can measure it, you can know when it's good enough." Kenji looked at his own hands. "You can't bend a dream." That night, Daiki didn't sleep. He lay in the dark, his father's words swirling in his head. And the old division returned heavier than ever, because now there was a face in it. It was no longer an abstract fear of failure. It was the face of the father he loved. The following morning, he went to Isamu before dawn. "I don't know if I can," he said. Without preamble, without context. Isamu understood. "Tell me what happened." Daiki recounted every word his father had spoken, every image that had played in his head during the night. Isamu listened in complete silence. When Daiki finished, he remained quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your father loves you." "I know." "This love is real, and his concern is real. You don't need to deny it to move forward." Isamu looked at him. "Ichinen isn't about ignoring what's difficult. It's about knowing, clearly, what you're choosing, and carrying that choice completely, including its cost. A man who chooses a path thinking it won't cost him anything hasn't chosen anything. He's just waiting for the path to get easier." "But what if I disappoint him?" "You will go." Isamu said this without hesitation. "For a while you will, that's part of the cost." He paused. "The question isn't how to avoid disappointing your father. The question is, can you carry that weight and still be whole in what you're doing? Because a man divided between what he chose and the guilt of what he abandoned, that man disappoints everyone. The father he left behind and the samurai he could have been." Daiki stared at the ground for a while. "How do I do that?" he finally asked. "Ichinen," Isamu said simply. "Every time guilt comes, and it will, you don't reject it. You acknowledge it. This is real. I feel it. And then you ask yourself, at this specific moment, what is my truest intention? Not tomorrow, not in the future, now, and you act from there completely." Chapter 8. The Absolute Focus. The following weeks were the most difficult and the clearest of Daiki's life at the same time. It was difficult because his father's silence weighed heavily on him at every meal, because his uncles looked at him with that mixture of disapproval and pity that's worse than anger, because the forge still existed next to the training yard, and sometimes Daiki would hear his father's hammer and feel that familiar pang in his chest. But clear because for the first time there was only one voice. Isamu had introduced a practice that seemed too simple to work. Every morning, before any training, Before any movement, Daiki would stop for a few minutes and ask himself a single question. Why am I here now doing this? It wasn't a philosophical question. It was an anchor, a way to check, moment by moment, whether the present action was coming from a place of clarity or a place of noise. In the early days, the answer was almost always confusing. Because I want to be a samurai came along with because I'm afraid of disappointing my father, and because I don't know if I'll be able to do it, all at the same time, pushing each other aside. But with time, and Daiki couldn't say exactly when it changed, the answer began to become clearer. Because I believe this is the right path for me. That's all. Without the surrounding noise. And when the response was clear, the training became different. Not easier, different. Isamu was now teaching him techniques, real movements, postures, the body language of a warrior. And Daiki discovered that there was a huge difference between executing a movement while part of the mind was thinking about something else, and executing the same movement with complete awareness. The quality of the latter was incomparable, not because the body was stronger, because it wasn't wasting energy sustaining the internal conflict. That, Isamu once said after Daiki executed a sequence with a fluidity he himself hadn't expected, is what happens when Ichinen is present. The body doesn't need to be commanded. It follows naturally because there's nothing inside you pushing in another direction. Chapter 9. It Remains. In the second month, Daiki failed. He failed mentally. It was a night of heavy rain. He had trained exhaustively during the day and was lying in pain when he heard his father coughing in the next room, that dry cough that had worsened in recent weeks with the cold. And something broke inside him. He went to the forge alone in the dark. He lit the fire. He began to work. He didn't want to, but he had to. He worked until dawn. When Isamu arrived for training and didn't find Daiki in the courtyard, he went to look for him. He found him in the forge, his eyes sunken, his hands calloused from a whole night's work. Isamu said nothing for a long moment. He just watched. I betrayed my choice, Daiki said without raising his eyes. No. Isamu entered the forge. You felt love for your father and acted on it. That's not betrayal of anything. But I was torn again. You are human. Isamu sat down on one of the benches. Ichinen is not the absence of conflict. It's the ability to return to alignment after the conflict has passed. The difference between the man who practices it and the one who doesn't is not that one never gets lost, it's that one knows how to find their way back. Daiki finally looked at him. The fall isn't the problem, Isamu continued. The problem is when the fall becomes part of your identity. When you look back at that night and say, I'm the kind of person who gives in, instead of, tonight I gave in and now I'm going to return. That stayed with Daiki for a long time. The difference between an action and an identity, between what you did in a moment of pain and who you are choosing to be. But here's something Isamu took a while to reveal, and it completely changes how you understand Ichinen. The practice isn't about you. Not just about you, at least. There's a concept that only became clearer to Daiki months later, when he was alone and still practicing. The Japanese believe that the quality of a single moment of awareness, a true Ichinen, spreads. In a human way. When you act from a place of wholeness, clarity, and undivided intention, the people around you perceive it in a way they can't always articulate. These people feel it. Isamu had left. And the following week, Daiki's father went to the training yard. Kenji stood at the entrance for a while watching his son train. Then he said in that deep, economical voice that was his natural language of affection, "You're not divided anymore." Daiki stopped. "Dad, I don't know what that man taught you, but you're not divided anymore." Kenji looked at his son's hands. "It's the same look I have when I'm bending a good iron, when I know it's coming along right. You have that now." It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was simply the recognition from one craftsman to another. The work is being done correctly. But it was enough. Chapter 10. The journey continues. Years have passed. Daiki didn't become the samurai from epic stories he had imagined as a young man reading Musashi by candlelight. Life rarely follows the outlines that imagination draws. But he became something he hadn't planned to be. A man whom other men observed in the same way he had observed Isamu that afternoon on the road. Not because of the techniques he learned, not because of the battles, but because of the way he moved with that lack of internal division that people perceive without being able to name it. Kenji died one winter afternoon with his hands crossed over his chest and a son kneeling beside him. They never talked at length about Daiki's choice. They never resolved that tension with words. But on that final afternoon, Kenji looked at his son and said 3 words. "You remained whole." It took Daiki years to fully understand what his father meant. Kenji's concern had never really been about the forge. It was about the son he saw divided, broken in 2, living only half a life. And what he recognized in the end wasn't the samurai. It was the whole man. That was Ichinen, not the destination you reach, but the quality of presence with which you walk towards it. Now let me ask you an honest question. When you think about the things you're not making progress on in your life, the project that stalled, the habit that won't take hold, the goal you restart and then abandon, what explanation do you give yourself? Most people respond with variations of the same phrase, "I lack discipline." And then comes the search for discipline. More rigor, more rules, more punishment when you don't comply. An internal war you wage against yourself every day, which consumes enormous energy and produces, at best, temporary obedience that lasts until the first difficult day. Ichinen proposes something different. Not how can I force myself to do this, but where is my action coming from? Am I acting from a clear, whole intention that I recognize as truly my own? Or am I acting from the noise, the mixture of fear, obligation, guilt, and expectation that I have accumulated throughout my life? Because the difference between these 2 points of origin is not small. It's the difference between Kenji's forge at 5 a.m., where a man works with the tranquility of someone who knows exactly what he's doing and why, and Daiki's forge when he was young, where a man works with his body but his mind is elsewhere. The same action, the same effort perhaps, but completely different qualities. To recap what we covered today, we've seen that discipline, as most people practice it, through force, resistance, and the accumulation of rules, is a resource that becomes depleted. Research calls this the exhaustion of self-control. The Japanese already knew this centuries ago. We've seen that the real problem in most cases isn't a lack of effort. It's internal division, 2 voices, 2 value systems, 2 worlds operating simultaneously, and all the energy being spent on the friction between them. We saw that Ichinen, this idea of gathering consciousness into a single point of true intention, does not eliminate conflict, fears, or difficulties. Daiki's father still disapproved. Doubts still arose. The fall still happened. But there was a difference. Instead of being consumed by conflict, Daiki learned to return, to ask at every moment, what is my truest intention here? We've seen that absolute focus, determination, singular purpose, and mental discipline aren't built by imposing external rules. They emerge naturally, almost inevitably, when you remove the internal division. When what you're doing and what you're genuinely choosing are the same thing. And we saw that a life lived this way doesn't guarantee the absence of pain, of mistakes, of loss. But it guarantees one thing that discipline through force never guarantees: integrity. The feeling that you are whole, that what you think, what you feel, and what you do come from the same place. Kenji recognized this in his son before he died. Not the samurai, the whole man. So let me suggest something practical for you today. It doesn't need to be big. On the contrary, the smaller, the better. Take one thing you've been trying to advance and failing at, and before you draw up yet another discipline plan, stop for a second and ask yourself an honest question. Is this action stemming from an intention I truly recognize as my own? Or is it stemming from what I think I should do? From what I'm afraid of not doing? From what other people expect? This isn't a question you can answer in a second. It's a question you sit with for a few minutes. And when the answer comes clearly, when you find the intention that is genuinely yours, without the surrounding noise, act from there, completely, without reservation. This is Ichinen, a thought, a moment of awareness. And sometimes that's all you need to stop freezing. If this video resonated with you, I have a request. Write a sentence in the comments below, not a goal. An intention. The truest intention you can find when you honestly ask yourself this question. When you write this publicly, you're not just commenting on a video. You're doing what Daiki did in that courtyard, gathering your mind on a single point and declaring, even if to a group of strangers on the internet, this is my Ichinen, this is my intention. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so. There's much more content coming about Japanese philosophy, psychology, and this quest to live a more complete and less divided life. Thank you very much for your attention and for your time so far. Be present, walk with honor, follow the path. Until the next video.